And just breathe easy for a little bit. Notice where you are in the road. That you're in the road. And get a sense of just settling into that space for a few minutes. Maybe notice if you take a couple of deep breaths. And then breathing normally really helps settle your body and your mind. And then bring to mind the reason why you are here tonight. We've been talking about it in terms of an ultimate goal. Why it is that you're spending your precious time doing this. And bring your mind back to your breath. Into that goal. And then see if you can bring to mind some action, body, speech, or mind that you did this week. That will help you achieve it. If you can't think of anything, don't get into a self-accusatory thing. Just notice perhaps the fact that you're not very aware of your own actions. And then feel a sense of gratitude for having the opportunity, the time, the resources, the awareness, the interest in doing these kinds of things. So it's not a matter of arrogance or self-congratulations. It's almost a sense of humility. Being grateful, which is a feeling and an emotion that opens our hearts. And then let your heart open even more so that action, those actions spread further than just yourself. They encompass all living beings. Maybe something like it's a gift that you give in gratitude, an offering. So, how did the exercise go last week for people? What was it like?
It was difficult.
It was difficult. In what way?
Just pinning down different stages, 4 stages, and just watching them happen quick.
Yeah.
But getting them to slow down was difficult. I mean, see it happen sometimes. I had shared with Dina. I had gone to the Getty this last week, and it was funny. It just came up. And there was a photography exhibit there, and it was purposely done so the pictures were ambiguous. You couldn't tell what they were. And the person that had taken the pictures wanted you to see what came up, which I thought, wow, that was really convenient, for me. So he wanted you to start from left to right, each picture. So I did, and I practiced the 4 pillars as I was going along. Here's the input coming in,
Nice.
do I like it or not? That was too quick to really tell, I think. Check, see what's happening in the spaciousness of my mind, And I could actually, because the picture was ambiguous, I could actually see my brain trying to fit it in somewhere. Trying to put a label on it. It goes here, it goes there, what is it? You could see it trying to identify. So it was really, that was very helpful for this. Slow down and actually
How long is that exhibit going to be on?
I don't know. I talked to somebody today who volunteers at the Getty, and she said it could have been today, could have been the last day. He had a strange name. I could look it up. A very simple last name.
It's interesting.
It was very, very timely.
Yeah.
Very, very timely. But then trying to do that same thing in meditation was, without analyzing it. I catch myself trying to analyze what was doing. But to just sit back and try to watch it, it's difficult.
And the only thing you can really do, because if you try harder, it's going to get harder.
Yeah, I can believe that's the paradox.
Right? So, The only thing you can really do is relax and kind of be patient with yourself. It will slow down. You will be able to see, at least catch it as it goes by.
But it just seemed like the do I like it, do I not like it wouldn't come until after I knew what it was. So I had a label on it. And then it seemed like, oh, because that's a chicken, innards or something. Oh, I don't like that. But not until after I had the label on it. It wasn't like immediate. It didn't seem like it followed in order.
Interesting. Anybody else? Yeah.
I was doing this spaciousness of the mind thing, and I thought I was doing pretty good until I realized I'm not in the spaciousness of my mind. I'm in a thought that thinks I'm in the spaciousness of my mind.
Yeah.
That was very depressing. I was like, yes, I get this. And then I'm just, I'm thinking I'm in the spaciousness of my mind now, and it's just another thought. How do you?
There is a. First of all, until you're in, what we call the direct perception of emptiness, or what, Alan Wallace on his poem calls Gelugpa. Which for our purposes are the same thing. There is going to be some level of very subtle thought. So don't get depressed about it. You just, again, it's the same thing where you recognize that it's a thought, and then you let it go. You let that thought go. And maybe in some sense try to try to let the mind rest or be in a space between the thoughts. It's very, very subtle. But, yeah.
But if
and then you say, oh, I'm in the space between the thoughts, and boom, you're in a thought.
You're not.
But is there truly a space between the thoughts? Because what is that space?
It takes, there is, I wouldn't necessarily say that there's a space between my thoughts, because I'm not particularly good at an awareness that isn't thought-based, but it is, as you get to more subtle levels of this, there is a certain kind of stillness that is not cognizable. And you can get more and more subtle.
So it's a mind with no object? Or a self-perceiving mind?
Pardon?
It's a mind that's perceiving itself, self-perception?
Maybe that's a better way to say it, where the object is the mind itself. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I don't know, to tell you the truth. And I think I described to people in retreat, there is a certain place where I've got to, where it feels like, just like letting go of just that last little thing. But I haven't been able to do that yet. And it feels like, that would be the direct perception of emptiness. And I haven't been able to do that. And when I've talked to particularly one person about it, she reinforced the idea that you do a lot of training, like we do, and then it's a matter of letting go and letting go and letting go and letting go. And you find it's not necessarily letting go of the training. it's as though it takes the training to be able to let go. So, and depending on what you do in a retreat, you may have some interesting experiences with it. I would recommend, we've talked about this before, retreats half a day, 2 days, a week, a month. But they're very powerful in terms of giving us experience with the lives, with this stuff, rather than theoretical ideas about it and then running into our own crazy minds and saying, okay, all I can do is theory. It can drop. Anyone else? All right. So we're continuing with the obstacles to mindfulness. We're continuing. This is going to be the rest of class 2. It is officially class 2 in your reading. It turns out that I said some fairly controversial things last week. I didn't realize they were going to be controversial. But it turns out that they were, so I think it's worthwhile to spend a little bit of time on it. And it had to do with the 4 pillars. Was that an earthquake, by the way? Or
I felt like I thought it was.
It was wind?
It was up, yeah, I looked up in the little lanterns and they weren't swaying, so they would have been swaying.
Okay. At one point, my eyes flew open, and I was really interested. Not everybody's did. It was very cool. Okay, so anyway, so it had to do with the 4 pillars that we've been doing, that step-by-step process that is watching how thoughts become thoughts that we were talking about. So Laurie was talking about those steps, just to go through them. You're noticing the data that arises through the senses, which is the way that you interact with the world. You notice a basic pleasure or displeasure or neutrality, that it becomes associated with that sense data. And Laurie, I have the feeling that there's going to be that as it slows down, you will recognize the feeling. But the thing is, when you're recognizing this feeling, and here's where some of the controversy came in. You recognize, you notice a feeling associated with the sense data, pleasure, displeasure, neutrality, and you don't judge that feeling. You don't say, this is a good feeling, this is a bad feeling, I like this feeling, I don't like this feeling, I shouldn't be feeling this, I should be feeling something else. You don't do that. You just notice it arise.
That's the first section.
No, that's the second one. Still, you notice that, the not judging has to do with, you notice a feeling, but don't take the step of commenting on it to yourself. And then you notice the space of the mind, the space within which that sense data and the associated feeling is happening. And to some degree, you may be noticing a perfume, a tint, a cast, right? So, I think we talked about it last week or in the meditation that you may notice an impatience or a relief or that isn't, and it's a shading of the mind. So you're not judging that. You're just noticing it. And then the 4th one is that you're watching the process, the whole process. You're watching, you're kind of putting it together. Oh, sense data, feeling in the space of the mind chicken innards that I don't like.
Right.
Yucky chicken innards or something. So the blowback was about the no judgment part. It was along the lines of, and it was, you know, it was more than one person, so just so everybody knows. It was along the lines of, but repressing my feelings, judging them and restraining them is the way that I'm making progress in Buddhism. You know, it comes up, but I push it away, I ignore it, I repress it, I restrain it, whatever it is, and if I didn't apply that, then I would behave badly. So, oh, and the thing is, if one person or two people come up to me and say something, then I know that it's out there. You know, I know that other people are thinking about it as well, or have that question as well. So I figured it's important to talk about. Of course, restraint for bad behavior is a crucial part of what we're all doing. Of course it is. I in no way did I mean to say that you should stop exercising restraint, that you should, you know, punch people in the nose when you feel like it, or yell at them, or even that you should, you know, let those thoughts just go on and on without restraining them. But there are three things about that. Not but. Three things. First of all, like I said, I hope that I did not give the impression that restraint is not an important element of becoming free in the way that we've been talking about. It is a crucial first step. It is, you know, 101 in the, you know, course 101 in the University of Spiritual life. It's fundamental, but it's not the whole story. Because, for one thing, your ability to restrain yourself will break down at some point. I can attest to that personal experience. Like when the person that you're being patient towards doesn't respond in kind. And they still don't respond in kind. By the third or fourth exchange, your restraint blown to hell. Even if you not manage not to express it, it's still boiling in there. And that's okay. I mean, restraint, I don't mean to say that that's an unworthy process. It's a very worthy process. It's what we do. You know, it's like I said, Buddhism 101 and 505 or whatever it is. I mean, you know, you never don't, you know, restrain yelling at people. But it's also a condition where you are continually fighting with your own mind. You're thinking, you know, it's like you're fighting what you think of as your natural tendencies. And that's not freedom in its ultimate sense. It's a step toward it, but at least as I see it, it isn't my idea of ultimate happiness if I'm fighting with my own mind. So even as we're learning to restrain ourselves, it'd be great if we could also work at a deeper level. And that's what this is getting at. It's a matter of what this, you know, process is doing is that it's trying to recognize the mental habits that we have so that we can break them long before we get to the point where we have to restrain action. Even though the action is only thought. We want to break that habit. We want that impatience or whatever it is to, you know, if it flares up, flares up and goes. Not that it sticks in our craw, wherever our craw is. Is this a craw? I don't know. Not that it sticks in our craw and we're, choking it down. So it means that it's an attempt, it's an effort to try to recognize it as early as possible. And then don't push it away. Instead, you deal with it honestly. In this process. I'm not talking about dealing with it honestly, which means that you say to the person who's bugging you, I need to be honest with you, you're bugging me. That's not what I mean. I mean dealing with it within yourself, honestly. And part of that is first recognizing that that's what's happening. So for example, you have an important task to do. And it's first of all, I put this together, I thought about it. As I'm driving here, and I'm late, the problem is there wasn't another person I could try to blame for it. So it's not such a great example, because I just got lost. But I'm like this at the wheel, trying to get here in time. And then I was like, Lauren, why don't you try to follow what you teach? Oh, this is impatience. And I just burst out laughing. And then I realized I'll get here when I get here, But anyway, so here's an example. Let's do it this way, because analyzing myself is way too difficult on the fly. So we have an important task, and it's too important for us to be held up by the slowpoke that's in front of us, whether we're driving or we're walking, or it's somebody who's hanging us up on a project that we're doing. We don't notice that there is sensory data coming in, perhaps through the eyes. Person in front, object in front of me impeding my way. And then we also don't notice an associated feeling, which is impatience. We don't see it that way. And we don't see that it's happening. We don't notice that this is happening in our minds. Got nothing to do with that person out there. This impatience, this sensory data, and then impatience is arising here. And then we cognize it. That, inefficient person, that slow person is in my way. That's the thought we have. We recognize that. But somehow then it's about that person. Instead of this kind of mental affliction, this feeling that arises, the sensory data and feeling that's all going on in here before we ever get to, creepy slow person. So, yeah, we're dealing with a person out there rather than what's going on in our mind. Now, most of us, if we're practicing, will have that feeling, bad slow person, creepy slow person, but we'll say, because we're good Buddhists and we work hard at this, probably shoving that person out of the way is not a good idea. Or telling them to, move their ass or whatever it is, probably not a good idea. We restrain ourselves. Perfectly appropriate to do that. Okay? But no matter how much we restrain ourselves and we lecture ourselves about what we should do, which is a good thing, again, that's a good thing, we still have the impatience is still flat, it's still there. Our mind is still dominated by it. We are fused with it. We become impatient. I am impatient. I am impatience itself. It becomes our identity. At that moment, not free in any meaningful sense of the word, because you're fighting with your own mind and you don't even know it. You don't know what you're fighting with. So, yeah. So, this thing is going on, and we respond politely, and we, ask them to be ask them to move, and maybe they don't. And then it takes even more effort to restrain ourselves until you can't take it anymore. And you just get rude. Or you stalk off and go somewhere, something like that happens. Or at the very least, you're saying, would you mind giving me a little room here? And in your mind is a riot going on. Craving, by the way, works the same way. An attractive object comes up and it pulls at us like a dog on a leash. And then we fight with ourselves. Yeah. So, I wanted to read this to you. Alan Wallace, because I did some thinking and some research on this thing of restraint and where it belongs here. So, Alan Wallace has this great piece of, the spectrum of freedom ranges from the slavery of psychosis through the dungeons of addiction, the everyday traps of craving, hostility, and ignorance, the subtle snares of spiritual materialism, which means, by spiritual materialism, it means, doing something, patting ourselves on the back because we've done something good. It's like we're collecting good deeds and, putting it in our baskets and pumping up the ego this way. And then he says, into the realms of exceptional mental well-being and complete liberation. Freedom from domination by mental afflictions allows one to make wise choices based on compassion, kindness, and foresight. Wisdom, compassion, and other virtues are cultivated to reduce the dominance of mental afflictions, which no longer compel harmful behaviors, and eventually one has no inclination to act otherwise. When the mind is completely freed, all the mental afflictions are eliminated. One acts purely out of reality-based compassion. According to a Buddhist notion of free will, the most realistic impulse that a person can have is compassion. So, how do we move along this spectrum of psychosis and enlightenment? Yeah.
Can I share a little example of my mind?
Sure.
So I was picking up some dinner for Sarah, and I got some Jamba Juice, and I was walking out of the grocery store, and this woman, and I was like,
She's going to get hers, right?
Right.
Which we all feel.
right.
But this is to help us learn to make space so that we break that habit. We can hear it happen. Where you say to yourself, well, in the situation that I did tonight, where I said, oh, this is impatience, but that was like, again, after the fact of the whole experience. So, yeah.
So the task is not to let impatience raise its evil, yeah?
The task, and this is not something that we can work on by by disciplining ourselves, by yelling at ourselves. This is something that we work on by spending time with our own mind. In meditation, in contemplation, as you're going through the day, so that here, like the example is, so let me go on, okay? All right. In terms of how to, because I will get there, how to move through this spectrum of psychosis, slavery to our mental afflictions, all the way to enlightenment. There are lots of practices. The 4 pillars is superb, though, for getting at this. And by the way, I need to keep saying this. These things the things you do are not mutually exclusive. Either I do the 4 pillars, or I practice the process that Tiffany was just talking about. These are not mutually exclusive. We're always practicing the process that Tiffany was talking about. And at the same time, we spend time with our own minds to try to recognize the process before that first reaction. So the impatience, they say, as Alan Wallace said, that at some point it will be completely eliminated. Maybe that's true. That may very well be true. At the very least, we rob it of power. We give it less and less and less power. So, because we locate the impatience earlier and earlier and earlier in its arising, let's say, maybe even at its birthplace. Okay, so, this is Wallace again. If the feeling associated with sensory data arises as desire and we are mindlessly captivated by its energy, does that make sense? Okay. It can lead to our own mother's detriment, but if we can observe the impulse of impatience or desire before being fused with it, before it filling your mind, before the I am impatient thing happens, before it shades that space of the mind, we can avoid becoming trapped by it. It arises, but it doesn't carry us away. We can see afflicted and non-afflicted mental impulses manifesting. Before passions come into it, we can observe it and recognize it for what it is and pre-passionately consider our options. We can make decisions and take action that's conducive to our well-being. So this is catching it before it becomes something that we have to restrain. It's like, it's like catching the tiger before it's enraged, before you have to grab up the whip and chair, to like keep it back. It's like catching this seedling impatience, you could say, and turning it into a docile prey before it ever gets enraged, before it gets powerful. So you take the same example. You have an important task to do. Through the sensory data, you see the person in front of you. Something is slowing you down. And as we get, skill at watching this process, you notice a feeling arise from the sensory data in your own mind, and then you can kind of say, look, impatience is rising in my mind. And you deal with the mental affliction, you deal with the problem. You deal with the mental affliction as the problem, rather than the person out there, rather than the object, if that makes sense, right? Because if it's about achieving freedom, you know, in the long run, that person has nothing to do with whether or not you achieve freedom, right? It isn't that he or she isn't the pathway to it. What stands in the way of you achieving freedom is your own mind. So that's what you want to be working with. You take advantage of the opportunity to work on the real problem, which is the sensory. It's at the earlier you can notice it, the better. The sensory data comes in through the eyeballs, or maybe somebody's yelling at you, so it's through the ear balls, or whatever. The sensory data comes in. There's feeling. And if you notice, look at that feeling that is happening in my mind. Let me work with that feeling rather than the person who's doing it. Let me work at controlling, at transforming, at, let me see what I can do with that feeling. Instead of let me see what I can do with this, creeping from me. Okay? Yeah. So the feeling of impatience or anger or whatever it is still arises. But more and more and more you rob it of any kind of power over you. And without that power, it'll fade on its own. And eventually, it's hard for me to say because I haven't reached that point. But eventually, it will be eliminated altogether. But while we're talking about that fading on its own thing, it'll be like that cloud. Oh, look, there's a cloud passing in front. Don't, right? It's just passing through. Let it go.
There's no quick fix though.
No. Well, in Buddhism 101, there are ways that you can help that process along, which is, by the way, doing exactly what you were talking about, which is, by the way, meditating, which is, by the way, creating, karma in many ways that most of us have heard about and practiced, that helps that process along. But magic pill, no. And things, as most of us know, or we wouldn't be here, things do get better. Even dealing at the level of restraint. This, though, is about, this is about not thinking that restraint is all there is. The point is not to get better and better and better and not restraining yourself. The point is to free yourself from having to restrain yourself. Yeah, and it takes time. Again, Lawless, this practice is to maintain mental spaciousness and observation, never collapsing into narrow views or familiar ruts, while gradually cultivating a sense of freedom. Even when visited by mental afflictions, we don't have to give them the keys to our house. By simply recognizing them as they arise, we can cultivate antidotes within ourselves, such as loving kindness and compassion. When we are able to act most beneficially for ourselves and others, then we are truly free. And like, again, Tiffany was asking, this is not necessarily a comfortable process or an easy one. It's really important to cultivate a good kind of relationship with meditation, which is why why I've been talking, a lot of us have been talking a lot about, just be in the space, breathe, enjoy it, hold that kind of thing, and then kind of make some small steps with it. But the ongoing process of meditation can bring you face to face with some very difficult things. The task is to remain present with whatever is dredged up. You don't repress it. You don't do that spiritual bypass thing. You recognize mental events arise, and before they take control of us, we just be present with them and make better choices in regards to them. Practicing on the cushion helps a lot with this. So, you know, yeah. We're not very good, as my example shows, you know, about myself. We're not very good at watching this process in daily life. We're not even that good at watching it in meditation. It's hard, you know, in daily life to kind of be aware, relaxed and aware enough in your day-to-day life to be able to notice these things. So restraint is crucial. The tiger is already mad, and you bring out the whipping chair. That's, you know, that's what you have to do. They're probably the only thing that will work at that point. But, you know, we're also working at in this process, in this meditation, we're working at taming that tiger, making it into a docile animal and prey. Right? So it's not that you're struggling with impatience, but you turn it into tolerance and love. Which brings me to the second point of blowback that I got. What's wrong with being a good Buddhist? Because I said a couple of times, I forget how I said it, but I obviously said it in a way that gave people the impression I was saying, don't be a good Buddhist. And the question was, what's wrong with that? And the answer is, nothing is wrong with that. That's a really good thing to be. The problem is the thing about spiritual materialism. We get so involved in being a good Buddhist, which is absolutely important training, that we forget what we're really after. Right? The point isn't to get better and better and better at restraint, although that's definitely part of the process. The point is to be free. The point is to work with your mind and yourself so that you don't have to restrain it, so that you don't have to be fighting with it all the time. If you're like me, you know, I've been doing this now for 15 years. If you're like me, restraint is fine, and I'm pretty good at it most of the time, not perfect by any means, but pretty good at it most of the time. And it gets to be very tiring. It gets to be not so inspiring. Just, you know, I'm really good at restraining my impatience and my anger and that kind of stuff. I want that sense of joy that comes with freedom, that arises with wisdom. That's what, you know, that's what I want. You know, I need to say clearly, I have absolutely no regrets about how I was trained. I think I have been extraordinarily fortunate in terms of the way that I have been trained. But there was a period of time where I got so involved in the what's the rule that I'm supposed to be doing that I forgot about what the larger goal was. Nobody's fault but my own. You know, this voice that's constantly, are you following the rules? Are you doing the right thing? You know, I don't know if other people have an voice drown out everything else. And you look up whatever it was 12 years later and say, how you doing on that ultimate goal thing? So it's a matter of not forgetting what the ultimate goal is, to be a human being. Yeah. When we talk about spiritual materialism, and that is, any spiritual life, it is really easy to fall into this. It's about mistakes that spiritual seekers, serious spiritual seekers, commit. And it turns into it turns the pursuit of spirituality into an ego-building endeavor. And that's the thing. It's somehow, as we get better and better at these practices, if it becomes a way to build the ego, even to ourselves, look how great I am. That's spiritual materialism. The belief and glorification of the ego, Lama Marut calls, the snowflake ego or the wave ego, is actually the fundamental problem. The say your name to yourself, identity, that you, the person that you think you are, the person you defend and protect and try to please at all costs, that ego person. If your practices are feeding that ego rather than relaxing it, that's spiritual materialism. So, yeah, and like we just to remind, we talked about waves are not independent of an ocean within which it arises and falls back. Snowflakes are not independent of the snowstorms of which they are a part. We are not independent of the world within which we exist. And sometimes, if I get really weird about it, I start thinking about it as a life force. But I can't really talk about that because it sounds too We'll be talking about this, though, this self thing later on tonight. Just for the moment, being a good Buddhist, practicing in the sense of practicing well, even in the sense of fake it till you make it, is wonderful. It's important. It's crucial. But it's not the, it's a part of the process rather than the goal of the process. Yeah? Thoughts, discussions, objections, any blowback? Make sense? All right, cool. So, we're moving to Kamala Shila. The text is called the Krama, Steps to Meditation. This is one of, we're working out of the first of 3 volumes. And the section is called Obstacles to Integration. There are, to put it concisely, 6 flaws that thwart complete integration. Laziness, drifting away from what's happening, daydreaming, arrogance, not taking an interest, and being overly engrossed. That's the verse. Just so you know, Lama Marut translated samadhi. You've heard of samadhi? People who have heard of samadhi? Do you have any sense of what, those who've heard of it, do you have any sense of what it means? So he translated it as integration. It's one of those words that often gets left untranslated, and then somebody says what it, what does it mean? And the answer has something to do with it's an advanced state of meditation or something like that. It's very, vague. And then we think we know what it means, or else we just bypass it. We read it, and we bypass it. Lama Marut says, etymologically, it sort of means bringing things together. So that's how he came up with integration. It's not the common translation of it, but he thinks that it's closer than other translations. Integration of what?
Like meditation.
It's integration of the person that we think we are with reality. Okay? Integration into life instead of being at a level of remove from it, as though we grasp onto this I. We hold onto the sense of, well, that there's me, and then there's reality, as though those are two separable things, and they're not separable. As though there's an I who then lives or does not live in reality. Okay? So samadhi, in the sense of integration, is the breakdown of that artificial duality. It's the breakdown of the separation between the process that you think of as you and the processes all around you. In the sense of, so like in the way that we're talking about, the wave is a process, but it is not separable from the ocean, which is also a process. It's all process. You are just process too, embedded in a larger process. Integrally, what did we used to say? Inextricably involved. Yeah.
Lama Marut said we're not a node in the network. We are the network.
We are the network.
So if we're not a wave in the ocean, we are the ocean.
Well, except that a node is they usually think of a node as a fixed thing. Yes. And I mean, you do have a self. This is one of those things. You do have a self. You walk around. It's not the same one, as Sarah. You do have a self, but it is a process, and it's negotiable, and it's changing all the time, and it's embedded in, there is a self that exists within and in relation to all other processes. That self is, I can never remember these words that we used to use in graduate school. Doesn't matter. That self is constantly changing. It is a process. So it's not a node. A wave, and the reason why the wave analogy is great, because the wave, it's clear, is not fixed. It arises, it dissolves. So integration means being aware of that process and going with it rather than fighting against it, rather than trying to separate yourself. So the 6 flaws that thwart our ability to be separated, meaning fully present with reality, here and now. First one is laziness. And this is different. Anybody in the Tibetan, you often hear this, that it's lelo, right? And it gets translated as as laziness. In Sanskrit, lelo is alasya. This is a different word, a different Sanskrit word, which is stronger than these. stronger in the sense of it's not just I don't feel like it right now. It's more like sloth or indolence or total apathy. Like I just don't care. And it even carries the connotation of intentional avoidance. Okay? I don't care. I want to avoid the trouble and the difficulty. I don't want to have anything to do with learning how to be here and now. Okay? So that's laziness. And we'll get back to these when we talk about their antidotes. Drifting away from what's happening. More literally, it means carried off or abstracted from the basis. Something like losing concentration, or more like losing touch with what's happening. Right? Just losing that integration. Daydreaming. The word is laya, which has lots of different meanings. Sometimes it refers to the dissolution of the self that is a kind of an advanced meditation practice. Here, it means something like getting diverted, getting distracted, going off into fantasy. Arrogance. Arrogance in the sense of like disdain for what's going on here and now. Like, I'm better than this. I shouldn't have to be in this situation. Or I don't have to do this. That's the kind of arrogance they're talking about. Not taking an interest, which he says is more like not enjoying. So it's not being involved in and not enjoying, accepting the here and now. Not accepting, enjoying, being aware of reality as it is, rather than as we wish it would be, or as it used to be, or what it might be. The sixth is overly engrossed, which is interesting. It's the opposite of not being interested, and we'll talk about it. What that could mean. Being overly engrossed. One thing it could mean is that, as you're in this sense of integrating with reality, you could become overly invested in samsara. But we'll talk about it. Next verse. The antidote to them is to cultivate 8 habits which will eradicate them. Confidence, will, exertion, assertiveness, mindfulness, full attention, consciousness, and equanimity. And then I'm going to read the next verse kind of right away as we go through it. The first 4 of these are about laziness. 4 of the 8 are about laziness. That's because this is our biggest obstacle. If we don't overcome inertia, if we don't overcome our resistance, then we never even begin. Then we have no chance whatsoever. And this can be in the form of the excuses that we give ourselves. I can't do it, as in I'm not capable of doing it. I'm too busy to do it. It's too much trouble. It's not that important. I'll do it tomorrow, next weekend, next year, next lifetime. I'll wait until such and such, all of the excuses. I'll wait till New Year's. I'll make a resolution about it. So 4 of these antidotes apply to just that one. The first 4 then are the antidotes to laziness, for it is through confidence, an indication that one has a strong belief in the good qualities of integration, that will which is the second one, arises in the practitioner. From will, effort, which is the third one, is produced. And through the fourth effort, the body and mind get into gear, which is the fifth.
Four.
What? I did 4. Okay, good. All right.
What is more than called?
Physical and mental assertiveness.
Confidence, will, effort, and getting body and mind into gear. And the last part of this, and where there is mental and physical assertiveness, laziness is averted. And so confidence and the rest should be cultivated in order to eradicate laziness. So let's talk about these. And they're actually a progression. They're not really in the sense of, well, you could work on confidence, or you could work on effort, or you could work on, the way that it's described there, one leads to another. So confidence that they're describing as gaining a strong belief in the good qualities of integration. The word that's being translated here, for those who've heard it before, is shraddha, which we sometimes translate as faith. But even when we translate it as faith, it's faith based on reason and experience. So here, confidence works better. It means that you've made up your mind that being integrated into life, being free, instead of being separated from it, is the best way to live. Right? You have confidence in that idea. And you recognize that this is actually important to you, that you would like to do this. So it's not just, gee, wouldn't that be cool? Like, wouldn't it be cool to have ice cream? Or wouldn't it be cool to lose a couple of pounds or something like that? It's about believing that you can do it. Or at least that you can do it. So it also has a certain level of belief in yourself. From that will, and maybe a better translation might be conviction, arises. So it's, this is actually important to me and it's worth doing, and I believe I can do it. Okay, damn it, I'm going to do whatever it takes to do it. I'm going to tackle this. That's will. From will, effort is produced, which could also be translated as determination. The Sanskrit word for those who know is virya. We often translate that as joyful effort, which is a great translation. It's a wonderful translation. But sometimes that gives us the impression that enjoying the effort is the most important part of it. It's our kind of misunderstanding of the use of the word. So it's not bad that you enjoy the effort. That's great. But a more important part of it is that you've gathered some strength and some power that you're putting behind the effort. You've got your back into it. So you're not just namby-pamby about it. Right? It's more than just, well, I'll give it a try. This is effort backed by the determination to succeed at it. From the force of effort, the body and mind get into gear. Literally, the translation, to translate it literally, it says your body and mind do something. So you've got this real power from the determination to integrate with reality. And you use that power to get yourself off your butt. And you do it. And you do it now rather than tomorrow or some other time. It's one of the great things about retreat, many great things. This is probably going to be a small thing, but most of us, when we get our conviction to do something, I'll start first thing in the morning. And meanwhile, it's the afternoon. On retreat, you start your retreat right before you go to sleep. So that you start it right now. It's so cool. Anyway, all of that is about overcoming laziness. So, not if, but when it happens that you've heard about something that you think is a good idea, like integrating with reality, or becoming free, or being truly happy, waking up in that sense. When the Buddha was asked if he was, are you a god? Are you enlightened? Are you this? Are you that? All he answered was, I am belief. I am integrated. He didn't say, I'm integrated with reality. I am here. I am present. I am awake. But so this, you have this experience that you hear about the idea of integrating with reality, and it sounds good to you, but you aren't actually doing anything about it. Take yourself through the steps. Okay? Do you believe being integrated with reality would be a good thing? Would be a good way to live? That waking up. Every time I say that, I think of that, that computer screen, wake up. That waking up would be a good thing. And that meditating, or whatever practice it is that you're working on, would be a good way to do it. Do you believe that you can do it, or at least make headway on it? That's the first one. The second one, okay, I believe it's possible, and I want to start. I want to wake up. That's the third one. That's the second. The third one is recognizing that it's going to take effort and saying, okay, I'm down with that. I'm cool with that. I'm going to do it. I'm not going to put it off. I'm not going to do it half-hearted. I'm going to do it now, and I'm going to do it the best I can. And then you get started. We do make time to do what we think is important to do. We make the sacrifices we need to make in order to do what we want to do, what we truly want to do, what we think is important to do. Right? Like if there is a vacation that you really want, that we really want, so we don't go to Starbucks every morning. We drink our coffee at home, or we bring our lunch, or any number of things that ways that we sacrifice in order to get something that we want more. So that's what this is. That's what theory is. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. If it were just a matter of floating into being awakened, you would already be there. It takes belief, it takes determination, it takes effort. But that doesn't mean we have to be all pinch-faced about it, right? Oh, this is such a sacrifice. I'm working so hard. Oh, I'm exhausted. That kind of thing. You can be happy about the efforts that you make, because it's bringing you something that's important to you. Right? Like you're not miserable about drinking coffee in the morning in your house every day instead of going to Starbucks, because you have that vacation in mind, or that, whatever it is that you're thinking about. So you can, there is an element, that's where the joy of joyful effort comes in. That's why it is a great translation, because you're happy to be doing. And the truth of the matter is, if you don't feel this way about it, it ain't gonna happen. Right? You could think it's a good idea now until, Christmas, or now until Christmas isn't far very far away. now until the end of your life, this life, you could think it's a good idea. But if you don't feel this kind of determination about it, this kind of confidence and will and effort connected with joy, you know, if you don't feel that about it, you won't start, or you won't be able to continue. But if you take yourself through this, I mean, it does work when I'm, you know, when I'm feeling sad, no, when I'm feeling, can't think of another song. You know, but when I'm feeling dejected, disheartened, which happens over the course of 15 years, you bet it happens. And I find myself saying, what do you think would be more important for you to do? What do you think is going to be, you know, is there something that is going to be of more benefit to you than others? Is there something that, you know, and I mean, I ask myself these questions. What is it that you're after? What is it that you're, you know, that you're kind of seeking? And do you think there is a better method? And do you want to waste your life? So those are kind of my words put on this process. These are kind of Sheila's words. A lot clearer than mine. But it's that process, and you know what? It helps me so that I'm not dragging my butt to the cushion. I'm going to the cushion with kind of anticipation. Yeah, and then don't think it's a once and for all process. Like you go through this when you're trying to get started and then you never have to do it again. Like I've been saying, you know, it's a long process. It's a wonderful process, but it's a long one. Okay. And let's take a break. That was all about laziness, right? Next sentence. Mindfulness is the antidote to drifting away from what's happening. So drifting away, and smrti, remembering or mindfulness, is the antidote. Reminding yourself or remembering or being mindful in the sense of remembering what you're doing and why. And in the sense of remembering that you actually are here and it actually is now, which we forget, and that this is the time to do it. This here and now is the only time there is to do it. Think about that for a minute. The present is the only thing that actually exists. So it's the only time that you can actually do anything. Your life happens in the present. Sounds kind of absurd. Like, when else would my life happen but in the present? But we spend a lot of time, a lot of our precious moments languishing in the past, like how it was then, that we liked it better, or wasn't it terrible, or something like that, or dreaming about the future, like I'll be really good at doing this and such tomorrow. I'll be better at it next week, whatever. Or on the other hand, dreading the future. So developing mindfulness in the sense of remembering that you are here and that it is now. Past is memory, future is fantasy. Doesn't mean that you don't plan for the future. Doesn't mean that you ignore experience from the past. It does mean that you don't ignore the present for the future fantasy or for languishing in past experience. So, how do we do this mindfulness thing, right? How do we maintain it? One way is to train through meditation and practice. As Tiffany was asking, that works in the long run, right? I wish it were easier. I wish there were a magic pill that we could take, some kind of magical thing that we could do, some kind of mudra, that we could do that would mean, okay, now I know how to maintain mindfulness. It doesn't work that way, especially when the present isn't really that pleasant. When things are going on that not only, where it's not only that we forget because of our tendency toward forgetfulness, we forget because we don't want to remember where we are and what's going on. But, the best thing I've learned for this is the mantra. Okay, so we're going to do it. You all have had this mantra, right? Om. It's like this now. Ahum. The Om actually is important. It tells you that you're going to be saying, it tells you that you're going to be saying something important. The Ahum is important as well because it stops you from going on with that sentence, which is what we normally do, which is, it's like this now, but I wish it weren't. It's like this now, but I wish it, but it used to be better. It's like this now, but it's going to be better later. All of those kinds of things. Anything after the but is taking you right out of the present. So you just stay with it's like this now, as a statement of acceptance. And even there's another one. It's like this now, and it's always going to be like this. That's another one that we tell ourselves, which is just the only thing that's true is the first part of that sentence. It's like this now. Because everything is changing, right?
For the ending, I'm sorry. Om is like this now.
Ahum. Oh, it's Ahum. I don't know a literal translation for that. Do you? Ahum. I don't think that it just means that's the end. That's the end of the mantra. So, yeah, because things are always changing. For better or, for good or ill. So it's like this now. Mostly we use this mantra to remind ourselves of a specific form of integrating with reality. Recognizing how things are now and being content with it. Accepting it. Not being upset that things are the way they are right now, that it's like this now. The actual problem in terms of your mental state isn't that things are like this now. It's that you're upset that things are like this now. It's the upsetness that is the problem.
in terms of your mental state. Being upset, how many people agree with this statement? Being upset doesn't change anything. It doesn't help. Have you ever been upset and then, and that fixes things? Cindy Lee wrote this great thing for a newsletter submission. I love it. The untamed elephant of the mind tends to rampage out of the arena of the present and crash instead into fearful nightmares or spellbinding dreams of the past and future, or fantasies about how the present should be playing out. We recognize that the guard of mindfulness has allowed the elephant to escape when we are swept away by these imaginary times and storylines, particularly when we begin anxiously grasping to what we think should be happening rather than relating to what is. Yeah,
Okay, so I have a great example that I would like to work through,
go for it. That you would like to work through?
that I would like us to talk about.
Okay.
So there's a woman at my work, and every day I walk into work, and she's got a picture of her son, who's 36, probably when he passed away. And every day, her son sits on her computer screen, on multiple computer screens, and she sits and she looks at him. And every day she talks about him, and every day she longs for him, and she sits with her suffering every single day, and she longs for her son every single day because she doesn't know how to let go. And I see that and I think, well, that's suffering, right? That's pain. But it's soothing for her to sit with her suffering. It's helping her. So we can say easily, oh, we don't want to sit in the past, right? We want to move forward, we want to be in the present. But she's sitting with her suffering of her son, and she's longing for her son. So suffering in the present, but it's from the past. So how do you get over that?
The first thing is that you have to want to.
Right.
And besides that, I mean, that's it. She has found a way to be happy for her, that she understands. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting question, and we can spend a lot of time on it. How much is that going to help you?
I'm using it as an analogy for some other stuff that would help. It would help me. So
How do you get for the most part, letting go of the past has to do with forgiveness and gratitude. In terms of death, how do you forgive death? There is a certain amount of accepting. There is also the element of accepting change and accepting loss. That things change and we will lose everything. That's what the death awareness meditations are about. It's not only true for us, but it's true for the ones that we love. There are many ways to work with that. But the first thing is you have to want to.
But in psychology, isn't the first rule that you allow yourself to suffer? You allow yourself a period of time. I don't know when that person, the son died, how long that has been. But the first thing is to allow yourself.
Well, you recognize it as grief without judging it. Right.
And then you move on to the other steps.
when you talked to her about it, yeah. It was like 5 years ago. Anyway, we don't have to go into the example.
So, mindfulness, that's what this statement is saying. Mindfulness is the rope that keeps the mind under control. You can have a mind that is unaware or a mind that is aware. Mindfulness is the guard, and we'll talk more about that when we do Shantideva next week, because he has a whole chapter just called Guarding Awareness. Guarding this thing that Lama earlier, that the verses were talking about, full awareness. Right? So, maintaining full awareness, which is protected by mindfulness, is the antidote to daydreaming and to arrogance. Right? That's what the verse was. Yeah. Full awareness is the antidote to daydreaming and arrogance. We've been talking about daydreaming kind of all night. Right? Don't have to spend more time on it. Why arrogance? What's the deal with arrogance here? This is kind of a best guess of what that's doing here. It's not that daydreaming and arrogance are opposite sides of the stick, like they would say mindfulness guards against dullness and agitation, which are two sides of a stick. This is that arrogance keeps you from understanding that what you're indulging in is a daydream. So it's like arrogance allows you not to, it's like I know better than what reality is presenting me. I don't have to do this. I'm better than this. I'm better than that you're better than the reality that is before you, that you are human, that you are interconnected, that you are subjective, that you are flawed, that you are mortal, right? Those are the realities. That's kind of like what looking reality in the face can look like. Can also look, it can look other ways as well, but, to try to pretend I am immortal and I should be immortal, arrogance can keep you from bringing yourself to facing reality. Okay? So, when daydreaming and arrogance are not brought under control, the flaw of not taking interest occurs. The antidote to it is the cultivation of consciousness. Okay, tell you the truth, I'm not all that clear on the differences between, I'm not sure how to distinguish consciousness from full awareness. And I did a fair amount of research and didn't find it. So my best guess is that what happens when daydreaming and arrogance are allowed to flourish, we get lost in the fantasies that we are indulging in, and to some extent we lose consciousness. We completely lose track. It's a precursor, the arrogance and the daydreaming is like a precursor to just being completely and totally spaced out. Sometimes they talk about consciousness as opposed to deep sleep, right? So deep sleep is what you go to sleep, there are several hours that go by, and you wake up with absolutely no recollection of what happened during those hours. So consciousness is the being awake and aware. You're cultivating consciousness as a way of supplanting that being completely spaced out. It's bringing yourself back maybe to your intention, to the job you've undertaken, which is being integrated with reality as it is. When daydreaming and arrogance are brought under control, which brings about mental tranquility, then there is the flaw of being overly engrossed. The antidote to that is to cultivate equanimity. Okay, so this gets more subtle. So first of all, notice he says when daydreaming and arrogance get brought under control, he doesn't say eliminated, right? It's like he's acknowledging the fact that they will arise, but like those clouds that arise and you let them go, right? You don't give them power to do anything other than dissolve. So through mindfulness, awareness, and consciousness, those things are under control. And that brings mental tranquility, which is Lama Marut's translation for shamatha. That stillness of the mind, the not darting around like a crazy elephant. This means that the main obstacles, the big ones, are subdued, right? The laziness, what were they? Laziness, all I can think of now is daydreaming and arrogance.
Drifting off.
Pardon? Drifting off, right. Daydreaming and arrogance. So those are subdued. And in that state, there's a tendency to get what they call overly engrossed. So it's like being completely engrossed in the process as it's unfolding, such that, that becomes the distraction. That becomes the cloud in the sky that you're doing this, to. We think in terms of the antidote, we think in equanimity in terms of, that everyone is equally deserving of our love, right? So, not the friends and enemies thing. And that's correct. That's no problem with that. But it's not the only meaning of the word. Equanimity also means things like mental calmness, composure, evenness of temper. So in this case, not overly excited or engrossed. Like for me, when something wonderful happens in meditation, I have a tendency to get so excited about it that I lose track of it, right? I'm overly invested in it. I'm so enthralled that I lose it. So this is staying with a calm mind. Yeah? Make sense? All right, so we did the 4 application of mindfulness, the 6 flaws to integration, and their antidotes.
I think I missed one of the antidotes.
Pardon?
I missed one. Mindfulness, equanimity, and what's the other one?
Let's look at the verse. 8 habits. Confidence. Oh, yeah, the first 4 are to laziness.
Confidence, will, effort, and getting on.
Effort and assertiveness,
Right.
right? And then mindfulness, full attention, consciousness, and equanimity. So, like I said, next week we'll move on to Shanti Deva, Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. I don't even know if he's ever even written anything. He probably has, but to me, all I know is that. One of the greatest spiritual texts ever written, so it's going to be very cool. And then the exercise this week, I printed it up because it's not in your reading, so I'll pass it out. So, as a contemplation or a meditation, you can do the official sitting thing, or you can do it as a contemplation. First of all, you bring to mind your sense of that ultimate goal. And if you don't have a sense of it, then work with that. And then for 15 minutes a day, go through the progression of the 4 antidotes to laziness, because it's the most important. So, confidence, you think about the reasons that you want to achieve it and why it's important to you. Think about the fact that you actually can achieve it and how you can do it. See if you can bring on that feeling. Or maybe just ask yourself questions so that you see where your stumbling blocks are. Don't just say to yourself, can I achieve it? No, thanks a lot, I'll go get a hamburger. Right? At the very least, you're recognizing your stumbling blocks, and things to work with. So confidence. The second one is will. with the confidence of knowing what this goal is, why it's important to you, that you can actually do it now, you bring about a sense of commitment to it. Third one is effort or determination. With that commitment, make it strong and powerful, and be happy about it. And then the fourth one, the body and mind get into gear. Make a plan about what you're going to do today. And then you get up and do it. So that's part of the, I mean, not, right away, but sometime during the day you do it. And do journal about it. This, like I said in the first class, sitting in class hearing stuff is all well and good, but it's not going to drop down to your very belly unless you make it experiential. So please, do the exercises and even journal about it. The journaling is to make you feel like, okay, I have a homework assignment. And like I said, I don't want to make people turn them in because I want them to be personal and private, and I want people to feel free to write what they want. But you can pretend that you're going to turn them in. Or maybe you'll turn them in and I'll take them right and put them in a fire or something like that, so I don't read them. But and then do that thing, and it doesn't have to be a grand gesture, right? Something small will suffice. And maybe you'll end up doing the same thing every day, which would be great. Or maybe you'll end up doing something different every day, which would be great. Either one is fine. But do remember to write about it, and we'll talk about it in class. So that's our class. On time. Just don't forget, Day of Giving is Sunday at 8:30. You can, what? Saturday. Saturday at 8:30. Thank you so much. I better change my calendar, because I have it on Sunday, I think. So we're meeting at 8:30, not here, right, at the LA Food Bank. And all the information is on the website, so don't forget that. We haven't arranged special carpooling, but it'd be great if you figured something out. The Blissfest fundraiser is a little more than 3 weeks away, so it's a great place to do Christmas shopping. It's a great evening. Please put it on your calendar and join us. And then Mira's one-day workshop is happening the 15th, the 8th? The 8th? The 15th is Blissfest. Thank you. Okay, so Mira's is the 8th, Blissfest is the 15th, and then on the 21st, which is a Friday, there's a weekend workshop starting, which I mentioned before. It's called Harmony of Heart and Mind. Conducted by Doug Wienhoff. You'll see it. It'll come through Thursday on your email announcements for upcoming events. Doug has been studying and practicing Buddhism for more than 20 years. He used to be a trekker in the mountains. He was also a what do they call it? A journalist. The ones that go out and do stuff. Investigative journalist. Thank you very much. He was an investigative journalist. He's a wonderful teacher, and he just completed an 8-week, pretty intensive retreat on what he's going to be teaching us. It's a workshop that is for people who are complete beginners and very new to meditation, and also all the way up to advanced meditators. I made sure that I said, this is going to be good for new people, yeah? He said, absolutely. And I said, but still for people, who've been doing it. He's absolutely. So, yeah. So, please put it on your calendar and join us if you're interested at all in meditating.
It's just Friday, or is it Friday, Saturday?
I'm sorry, it's Friday night, Saturday starting somewhere around noon or 1, Sunday starting somewhere around noon or 1. 3 days. Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. See you next week. Oh, here. Sorry. These are the exercises.
Please make note of the donation goal for the snacks. Can help us.
Sorry, what was that?
Donation for snacks.
And to help run the center. Absolutely. Yeah, I have one too that I need to leave for Heather. Pardon?
She's going to be here tonight. She told me to bring it tonight. She's going to be here. I mean, obviously something happened.
Yeah.
But, and I hate to
I put mine in the green room.